Okay, let's be honest. Every single one of us who watched this movie at one point or another somewhere in this film looked at the screen and went, "What the hell is going on?" In case it's relevant, full disclosure, I guess, I went into this movie with high expectations. I went into this movie fully prepared and ready and willing to ignore and let ride any mistakes, any stupid, any plot holes, any leaps of logic, all of it. I was ready and willing to let it all ignore all of it, because I was all about the inversion idea. Okay, I was all about how the movie was going to set it up, present it, work with it, apply it, how it was going to be in part of the movie. I was all about the inversion concept. Now, when it comes to science fiction and high concept ideas, what a writer will usually do is establish rules in regards to the idea. The value of it is that as long as the movie or novel or whatever sticks to the rules that were established, it helps ground the idea. It helps the audience provide the suspension of disbelief necessary to accept the idea. I guess a quick rough example would be lightsabers in Star Wars. Now, lightsabers in and of themselves are, let's be honest, a weird idea. But because there are rules on why lightsabers work and how lightsabers work and all that stuff, as long as the movies apply the rules that have been established in regards to lightsabers, then the audience has no problem accepting lightsabers. It's when a movie breaks the rules or ignores the rules or doesn't know about the rules of lightsabers, and you get something like this, which results in people going, "That doesn't make sense. That breaks the rules." Well, considering J.J. Abrams didn't even know about the rules, but that's something else. Let's back to Tenet. So, with the movie Tenet, what Christopher Nolan does is he constantly sets up rules, but then constantly breaks those rules and ignores those rules, leaving the audience unable to know what are the rules and what can and cannot happen. The beginning has a few examples. When the main character, I don't even know, does he even have a name? Because I know he refers to himself as the protagonist. Anyway, the main character, he dies or thinks he dies, and he comes back. And the movie establishes, okay, that you have to pass a test, okay, just to get the information, because our main character's only information is this and the word Tenet. So the movie's established just to get the information of this and the word Tenet, you have to pass the test. Except later in the movie, you have literally a whole squad of people who know how the goddamn inversion system works. You have like a grunt literally explaining to our main character, I think it's how turnstiles work. But wait a minute. The movie established that you have to pass a test just to get this symbol and the word Tenet. what did it take for these other individuals to get that information that they have? And how come the main character never got that information? This is not me pointing out the mistakes that I think are in the movie. I'm just trying to establish how the movie is breaking the rules it's establishing. Okay? Then we have, he meets the scientist. And there's that scene where he's got his glove out and the scientist says, pick up the bullet. And he's got his hand out and it doesn't work. And the scientist says, you have to drop it first. Well, here's a rule on how the inversion concept works. To be able to activate the inverse properties of an item or like an item, you have to actually perform the action to be able to have the inverse happen. So he can't pick up the dropped bullet until he actually actively drops the bullet. And I'm going, okay, this is great. I love it. I wonder how it's going to apply in the movie. Except this scene already happened.
You're not shooting the bullet, you're catching it.
Well, wait a minute. The scientist established a rule that you have to perform an action to be able to establish the reverse of the action. He never fired the bullet. How was he able to activate the inverse properties of the bullet to be able to get the bullet back into the pistol? Again, I'm not trying to call out the mistakes of this movie. I'm trying to establish how this movie is establishing rules and then breaking them. Because not long after we get the explanation, we get this scene. How was he able to pick it up? He never dropped it, thus was never able to activate its inverse properties. This is the problem with the movie. Because it's constantly breaking its rules, the audience is going, we don't know what the rules are. Another aspect of this movie is it ends up actually changing the rules of the inverse idea. Because it starts off with the inverse properties of an item and how to activate it. But then it literally goes, we're not worrying about those rules anymore. We're not even worrying about that concept. We're never even going to apply that aspect of the inverse concept ever again. It's now all about turnstiles. And it's like, okay, fine. Well, what are the rules of how turnstiles work? There are none. There's explanations on how it works, but there's no rules applicable to what you can and cannot do with the turnstiles. Because now, instead of the rules being you can only activate the inverse properties of items, now the inverse concept is being able to walk inversely in real time. And it's like, well, wait a minute. You can't just have some grunt spout off exposition about how the turnstile works and suddenly we're supposed to go, okay? Thus, the audience is constantly playing a game of catch-up and is constantly left behind. Now, granted, there is a rule that the movie establishes about being active inversely and follows it faithfully. And that is, when you want to be active inversely, you need the mask to be able to breathe. That's great. Except the movie follows that particular rule as a crutch to try to deflect from all the other things that you can do actively inversely that have no rules and no explanation. Such as when the main character's in that car accident is about to explode and all the frost happens. Now, granted, the movie explains how it was able to do that, and I'm going, okay, is that now a rule of what you can do? No, because it never gets used again, even though there's a dozen situations in which the entropy would, because again, the explanation, as I remember it, and if I'm wrong, I apologize, the entropy fights itself and the universe or reality tries to compensate for it. Well, there are dozens of situations in the movie where that would be applicable, but the movie doesn't apply that rule, so now the audience is left going, well, now we don't know what the rules are of what being active inversely can and cannot do. Another example is the fight scene between the main character and himself. This is where I just tapped out of the movie because okay, first off, why was he fighting himself? I understood why the main character going through real time was fighting his inverse version, I guess. But why was the inverse version, who is himself, fighting his other version? There's no reason for them to have been fighting. And not only that, how was the inverse version able to block and throw punches while moving inversely to his opponent, which was himself, who was throwing punches and blocking in real time? How does that work? This is what I mean by the movie doesn't even bother with the rules anymore. But the worst part of that fight, which made absolutely no sense anymore, was this scene. Okay, can somebody please explain to me why the main character literally tried to kill himself? He was firing the bullets, and even if he wasn't firing but just getting the bullets back, because earlier in the scene you see the bullet holes in the glass.
Hasn't happened yet.
The main character tries to shoot himself in the head. The bullet holes are gone and the bullet retracts into the pistol. Well, if we go by the rule that was established in the beginning of the movie, when did the main character shoot the bullet to be able to use the inverse properties of the item? Except, no, that's not how it works anymore. Because he was moving inversely, it's no longer about the actual item activating the item's inverse radiation. But then, how does that work? Now, again, to be fair, maybe I missed something and you guys understand how it worked and the movie does explain it. If it does, please, in the comments, explain how that worked. Explain why the main character was fighting himself as opposed to just, surrendering and backing off or whatever. Why was he trying to shoot himself? I apologize. I don't want this video to devolve into me bitching about all the problems I had with this movie. Old habits die hard, I'm sorry. Because this movie had such a divergent high concept, it was essential for the audience that the movie established firm and clear rules to allow the audience to be able to follow along. And it was essential for the movie to apply and follow those rules. And because it didn't, it ended up leaving the audience not even following along anymore. Okay, I'm not going to say, this is not in, I'm not speaking for you and this applied to you, but I'm going to use an example of what happened to me and my friends as we, in watching this movie. It got to the point where we even stopped bothering to follow along. We simply went, you know what, Nolan, you do you, whatever. We, like,
do you, boo-boo. Do you, boo-boo.
It was as if Christopher Nolan no longer cared if we were following along. It's like Nolan no longer cared if we even were providing even if we were giving suspension of disbelief. It didn't matter anymore. It was, this is his movie, this is how he was going to do it, and whether or not we were able to follow along as an audience was not even relevant anymore. And because of all that, I think that was a major contribution as to why it left the audience at one point or another, somewhere in this movie, absolutely confused as to what the hell was going on or why. Not to mention the convoluted timeline that is going through this movie. I'm not even touching that, because I'd have to watch the movie like what, 2-3 times and have a chart going. Like, I mean, I'm sure there are those of you that were able to follow the timeline, and kudos to you, but I was just, I stopped caring about trying to even follow the timeline. Anyway, I just wanted to make this video in case any of you who watched, Tenet and felt that you were totally lost and confused, that it's not exactly your fault, and that the movie failed to do what was necessary or essential to be able to have you follow along. Because it didn't establish rules and follow those rules, there was really no way for you as an audience member to even to know what was going on, because the movie failed to provide the information necessary. At the same time, I also wanted to throw a couple of jabs into this movie, because my God, there was so much stupid and bullshit that I wanted to cover, but I figured it's irrelevant making a video talking about all the problems I had with this movie. But anyway, I hope this video, I guess, I don't know, helpful? See how that goes. Anyway, I'm out of here. See ya. I wonder if there's going to be a Tenet 2.